Welcome to part 2 of your French and Indian War Notes. Last time we talked mostly about how the war began and what really set up the war. Today we're going to talk about the actual war and the aftermath. So, early on there are French victories, right? The French seem to be winning the war. They build a large number of forts in western lands, and the British send this man named General Edward Braddock, and he arrives to lead the British. He's very famous. He arrives to all kinds of fanfare, and everyone's happy to see him there. But the problem is he's not prepared to fight the Indians. He's used to the British fighting in lines and open fields. He's not really prepared at all for the forest. And fighting in the forest in the Indian tactics of ambushes is something that's not familiar to him at all. He doesn't survive the very first battle, and 1,000 British troops die. Just a little example of what that may have looked like. I do have a quick little video here. It's from the movie Last of the Mohegans. I'm going to cut it off before it gets too violent for your young eyes, but just want you to pay attention to how the British are kind of in lines, right, and how the Indians attack with the French help from a surprise angle. They're not sure what they're about to get. They're not sure where they are. Just watch the video. I think it'll be beneficial. Okay, so I think really, I know that's a quick clip, but I think it really shows, how the British were often surprised in the woods by the Indian attacks. So Britain really takes charge eventually after the war, despite the ambushes. The Iroquois, that big tribe we talked about in the last set of notes, they actually side with Great Britain. William Pitt becomes the British Prime Minister. He begins to aid the colonists, sends them lots of money, pays for supplies. He actually helps in other parts of the war too, hiring troops from other countries like Prussia. And he also has the best generals to come and organize the colonists to prepare to fight the French and Indians. Part of the organization was that New England troops began to fight in the Canadian frontier, and then people from Pennsylvania, Virginia, they began to fight more in the Ohio River Valley. So there's an actual plan of attack now instead of just kind of a ragtag bunch of colonists. All right, so once again, who fought in the French and Indian War? Okay, and the answer obviously is the British versus the French. Okay, so the British eventually have many victories. They capture many forts in the cities of Niagara and Montreal. The British force the French to abandon Fort Duquesne, which they then rename it Fort Pitt. Fort Pitt then becomes the city of Pittsburgh. The French city of Quebec is the capital of New France. It sat on a high hill, and they thought it was impossible to attack that city. But in a sneak attack, the British captured the city, right? Even though both the British and the French general are killed in that battle, it's still a British victory because they take control of the city. And pretty much then, after the capital was taken, they have taken basically all of French territory in North America, and now the French has very little power in the area. All right, so which is not a reason the British gained momentum halfway through the war. The Prime Minister Pitt sent money to the colonies. General Braddock arrived prepared to fight. The Iroquois joined on the English side, and troops began to organize. And obviously we know from a few slides ago that General Braddock actually arrived unprepared to fight. So the correct answer then would be B. All right, so the French are defeated, not just in North America, but the British capture the French islands in the Caribbean. The British forced the French out of India. They destroyed the French in Canada, and the British score major victories in Europe and the Philippines also. All right, so at the end of the war, the Treaty of Paris, 1763, the year is important because there's other treaties of Paris that we're going to talk about in this class. So the Treaty of Paris, 1763, France gets to keep a few islands in the Caribbean, most notably Haiti. France gives Canada and the Appalachian territories to Great Britain. Spain received land west of the Mississippi River, known as the Louisiana Territory, and the port of New Orleans. Florida was given from Spain to Britain, and North America was now divided between the British and the Spanish with the Mississippi River at the border. This is a quick little map. It shows the before and after. Let's see. So before, the British are pretty much confined just to the coast, and the French have this large interior section of North America. But after, the French are pretty much out completely, just in Haiti here, and then it's pretty much a 50-50 split in North America between Great Britain and Spain. France is pretty much out of the picture. And quickly here, there's just another map with the same color scheme this time that shows you the same thing, right? Very much a, jigsaw puzzle of different territory. But then after the war, the French are pretty much just forced to be here in Haiti, and you have just the two sides. All right, Native Americans after the war. Once again, the Native Americans are on the losing side, as unfortunately they so often are. They're left without an ally and without a main trading partner. The British did not pay Indians for the lands that they took from them. Indian tribes tried to unite and fight under an Indian chief named Chief Pontiac, but they fought in Detroit and other Great Lake areas, but really were largely unsuccessful. So to prevent more fighting with the Indians and westward expansion, the British Proclamation of 1763 said that the Appalachian Mountains needed to be the new border, right, for the colonies. No one was now allowed to settle west of that border. Okay, this area here was reserved for those Indians. If they kept the Indians happy, they would stop attacking, and then England wouldn't have to continue to pay for war, both financially and in the terms of life as well. This, however, made the colonists angry. British colonists wanted these western lands, and oftentimes they just ignored the proclamation. The King of Britain made the colonists pay for the war and began to tax them heavily. This also made colonists angry. Okay, so this is kind of the beginning of what will lead to the American Revolution that we'll talk throughout the month of November about. Okay, so which is not a reason the colonists grew angry at Great Britain? The Proclamation of 1763, the king raised taxes, the king allowed the French to settle in New York, and the king asked the colonists to pay England back. All right, obviously we said nothing about C, which is the one that said the French settle in New York. That didn't happen. All right, something to think about. We'll talk about in class. What were some of the results of the French and Indian War? Just keep that in mind as we go through. What happened to French territory in North America after the French and Indian War? I think we pretty much just went over that. Did they lose most of it? Did they expand it? Did it stay the same? Or did it move to South America? And I think really we all know the answer is that the French lost most of their territory. Okay, that completes our notes on the French and Indian War. Enjoy the rest of your evening.